Welcome. It's our last panel, and to be honest, I'm a bit sad already because it was amazing 2 days, lovely 5 panels till now, and the large scale, the big finale will start right now. Today we talked a lot about VR and AR. We saw examples of productions. We learned a lot about how to apply, where are the challenges. We discussed it with more than a dozen experts from all around the world. And after our talks today, and at the end of our panel discussion, we also want to do a little summary of the 2 days of hope. Paula, our host from yesterday, will join us again. And yeah, let's see what all of our speakers will have as a summary of hope. But now I'm introducing you to our host of this day, Marian Oso, Professor of Interactive Media at the University of York, and he will guide you through the evening. Enjoy it, and till later.
Thank you very much, Doug. It's been an absolute pleasure for me to have hosted today, and there's more to come, really exciting presentations. Let me just give you a summary of what's in store for us tonight. Noah Nelson from the United States will open up this session with a keynote, positing that the fundamental crafts of the performing arts are the missing piece in the puzzle of developing new genre-defying experiences into the various realities facilitated by immersive technologies. We'll have the chance to engage in a question and answer session, and please post your questions both during and after Noah's talk. And then we'll have 2 large and prominent institutions sharing their experiences in the actual use of immersive technologies, the Finnish National Opera and Ballet Opera Beyond, who are exploring possibilities provided by emerging technologies for performing arts, a talk given by Annastina Haapasaari, and then the Royal Shakespeare Company's presentation on their experiences of enlarging audiences during a pandemic, using Dream, their recent production Dream, as a teaser, a talk given by Sarah Ellis. And after this, we'll have the opportunity to discuss in more detail with the 3 nominated persons. So let's kickstart the session with the talk from Noah Nelson, who is the founder of No Proscenium, a publication dedicated to exploring the immersive and experiential arts. He's also founded its sister Everything Immersive, a website, and he's co-founder of Laila, the League of Experiential and Immersive Artists. He holds a bachelor in theater arts from San Francisco State University. And as he says, as the internet transforms into the metaverse through spatial computing, MR, AR, VR, etc., platform holders look for ways to shape experiences that move beyond the limitations of games, film, and television. Again and again, they find themselves in the dialectic of theater. In our increasingly immersive future, it is the fundamental crafts of our performing arts, from a dancer's embodiment to the drama of a well-made play, that are the missing pieces of the puzzles. And Noah, we're all looking forward to hearing more about your theory. The stage is yours.
All right. Here we go. It is all trust from here on. I'm looking at the slides, so let's see how this goes. I am Noah Nelson. I am the founder of a site called No Proscenium, the self-styled guide to everything immersive. where we get to sit in the ecosystem is between immersive theater, VR, escape rooms, themed entertainment, all these different disciplines. And tonight, what I want to do for you, it's today for me in Los Angeles, what I want to do for you is kind of give a 50,000 foot view of what is probably like the hottest buzzword in the tech sector, or one of the hottest buzzwords, and that's the metaverse. And indeed, the slides decided to not work right when I wanted them to. Oh wait, no, there, the metaverse. You gotta love slides. I don't work with slides all that often. Here we go. So the metaverse. When you hear the metaverse talked about in the tech sector, what you're usually hearing is a company posit that their platform is the next big thing. People talk about this app, Roblox, as a metaverse. Roblox is a video game that's been around longer than Minecraft, that mixes a little bit of Minecraft, a little bit of Lego, into this dynamic user-created content that involves all these different games that people play. So not just people making worlds, but people making games. And they recently went and had an IPO and raised $45 billion valuation. That makes them bigger than companies like Electronic Arts. It means that they're valued at more than Minecraft was when Minecraft was sold off to Microsoft years and years ago. And the way that the people who make Roblox talk about their platform is that they are building the metaverse. They are building the thing that will spatialize the internet and have a persistence across multiple different platforms. Or at least that's what they should be talking about. But really what they're talking about is getting everyone to use their one platform. There is this idea that everyone is chasing of an interconnected series of worlds, much the way that websites are currently interconnected. But much like we saw in the wave of Web 2.0, everyone knows that if you own the platform, you pretty much get to define how people behave on the internet and who makes the most money. Another platform that people talk a lot about when it comes to the metaverse is Fortnite. Fortnite is this video game that involves, in part, all these different characters being brought in from different intellectual properties. Here you can see the Mandalorian from the Star Wars ship. We talked about this. We talked about not doing this when Daddy is working. Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. The Mandalorian, Fortnite, right. So Fortnite brings all these different characters in from Star Wars, Marvel comics and movies, DC, and when people look at it from the outside, they say, oh, this is a metaverse. In some ways, folks aren't too wrong in that this idea of characters having identity that crosses from one fictional world to another, a persistence, that is a critical component of this idea of the metaverse. And indeed, there's a lot of companies chasing this in the form of what are known as virtual beings. Virtual beings right now exist in the form of things like little Michaela, who is a Instagram influencer. Michaela is an entirely computer-generated being. There is a team that crafts these pictures in order to sell products on Instagram, the kind of things that, you know, humans used to get money to do. Now, Michaela and her ilk are out there selling things to Gen Z. And they're building a mythology around the character, having the character get interviewed by people, working in videos. There are also characters like Lucy. Lucy started out as the lead character in a Neil Gaiman book called The Wolves and the Walls. That got turned into, a couple of years ago, a VR project also called The Wolves and the Walls. But the folks at Fable Studio who created that VR experience, all of whom came out of Pixar and Oculus, they have ambitions in this idea of virtual beings that go beyond just having Lucy in one game. They're working with their team of writers and with AI technologies like GPT-3 in order to create an interactive version of Lucy that people can talk to through Zoom meetings like this one. Lucy recently did some of this at Sundance and worked with people who were visiting, and using the GPT-3, they made it so that Lucy co-wrote a movie that they then did in CGI and premiered at Sundance over the course of the festival. Lucy is not anchored to her game anymore. She's out there in the world. Mind you, she's supported by an entire studio in order to make her exist. But she's running around out there doing things outside of the walls. That's a key part of the metaverse. This idea that a character can jump from world to world, much in the same way that a person can jump from world to world. In Fortnite, the characters are jumping in from places, like I said, like Marvel movies or The Mandalorian, and players can use their visage as their own identity, but also play with these characters inside that world. Now, that's not enough to make the metaverse, but the underlying technology of it is being created. There's a company called Epic. They own Fortnite and they've made a lot of money through it. And they keep on putting their money back into the fundamental technologies underneath it, which is the Unreal Engine. Now, you may have heard about the Unreal Engine because it is a key component of virtual production. Once again, we're back to The Mandalorian here. The way they're working this show is they've got a virtual volume set up out in Manhattan Beach. So what you're seeing there is not a projection or a painted backdrop, but those are actually LED screens that are showing the already CGI produced set in real time. They can scroll through all that, and it's providing natural lighting. That's how powerful these screens are. The ground has been set decked just the way you decorate any old set. But the filmmakers are able to manipulate everything in real time. Again, this technology is the same kind of technology, like the identical platform tools were used for the RSC in Dream. So here we see them on their volume doing motion capture work. And Sarah Ellis is going to talk to you more about Dream in a bit. But once again, Fortnite is a game made by a company called Epic using something called the Unreal Engine. And the Unreal Engine is used for virtual production in television and film, and now in theater. All of this starts to head us towards the idea of the infrastructure lying underneath this idea of the metaverse. Now, the companies don't want there to be a lot of interoperability. They want to own that platform, right? Roblox and Epic and Facebook, all of them want their platform to be the one true technological tyrant that completely controls the space. But even then, everyone is so focused on the platform and the tools, folks start to forget, well, what are we going to do when we get there? All right. The truth about the metaverse is that it is not a single platform owned by one company. The simplest definition of it is the sum of all worlds. You can find that on Wikipedia, and actually it's pretty accurate. The idea of the metaverse has been around since the early 90s. It first showed up in a book called Snow Crash, a science fiction novel that was incredibly popular. I read it contemporaneously. That was written by this guy, Neil Stephenson. So Neil is this genius level science fiction writer who has been producing consistently for decades now, and first crafted this idea of, articulated the idea, we had it before, of jumping from world to world in a way that was embodied. So not just staring at screens, but actually moving through this space. He was so good at this that when the Magic Leap came around, that company hired him to be their prime futurist. Because Magic Leap was interested in what spatial computing looks like. Spatial computing is, of course, AR and mixed reality, and indeed it is VR. So these helmets, goggles, whatever we want to call them right now, that handily fall apart when you grab them. These devices, as we all know, they take this flat internet we have and give it a third dimension. Microsoft is betting heavily on this idea. They're snapping up companies and technologies in order to create what they call Microsoft Mesh. So even when an individual company has a stumble, and Magic Leap's had a stumble lately, we still have all of these other companies chasing this idea of spatial computing. And they're wondering what it's going to look like, which is why they turn to guys like Neil Stephenson to start to define the metaverse. But the interesting thing about Neil's work, and the place where I get fascinated, isn't in just this simple idea of jumping from website to website in an embodied fashion so that a department store's website starts to be a department store that you can move around, that everything just becomes a high street shopping experience. Again, the question is, what happens inside? What are the, not just the transactions you're having, but the interactions that you're having with beings and people inside those environments? And Neil actually wrote another book that starts to point the way. This was the follow-up to Snow Crash. It's a book called The Diamond Age. And in The Diamond Age, Neil introduced the concept of the Raptor. This is my friend, Dasha Kittredge. She's a performer in a VR show. That show is called The Underpresents. It is produced by a company called Tender Claws. When Tender Claws was building The Underpresents, the first thing they did was they partnered up with a theater company called Piehole in New York. And they did a bunch of motion capture and captured the performances of members of Piehole. But they also wanted to take actors, live actors, and put them into the game so that the players could interact with them in real time. They went and did this, and because of pandemic, they even wound up producing a production of The Tempest, a short kind of children's theater-y production, but nevertheless, one that allowed about a dozen audience members to interact in real time with a performer. And the thing is, Dasha isn't just any old actor. She's been in immersive theater productions. This is a still from the show Delusion, which is very popular here in Los Angeles. It's an anthology horror show that comes every few years at Halloween time. And I first met her because she was doing this kind of work. It was actually at a Fringe festival where there was a very small immersive interactive theater piece. These kinds of works, this immersive interactive work, we know that it has legs because of things like Sleep No More. What we don't necessarily know on the theater side is that the tech folks are looking at this intently all the time. One of the first conversations I had with folks at Oculus, I got to have at GDC, which is the Game Developers Conference. It happened to be the very weekend that they were selling themselves to Facebook. And I talked with Nate Mitchell, who at the time was the VP of product. We were on the floor of GDC and they were showing off some of their latest demos while lawyers about 50 miles away were inking the contracts that would turn them into the behemoth they are. And Nate said to me, whoever takes Sleep No More and puts it into the headset, they win. And what Nate meant by that was that whoever can figure out how a dynamic experience that involves traversal, that involves interacting with performers, that tells a story, but also gives agency to the audience in order to find their own path through the narrative, that is the goal. That is the North Star of virtual experiences. And indeed, it's table stakes for the metaverse. One of my favorite shows was, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, Then She Fell, produced by a company called Third Rail Projects in New York. This is an incredibly intimate show. There's only 15 audience members to about a dozen performers. But it ran for years, and it's one of those seminal experiences. It's kind of the velvet underground of immersive theater. You go see it, and you're like, oh, I need to make that. And folks who saw it included the people who made The Wolves in the Walls. They went through Then She Fell and saw what they were looking for. The way that company designs the experience for the user, the way they train their performers to interact with the audience members, that's what they wanted for Lucy. So they hired them. That's Zach Morris, one of the three people who runs Third Rail Projects. He's working with the actor who's doing the mocap for Lucy. That's mocap stills from the actual setup. How a person, how an actor, how a virtual character physically interacts with people digitally. All these textbooks are trying to solve that, but we've already solved it in immersive theater. So when something like The Underpresents comes along, they turn to trained actors, immersive actors like Dasha, in order to create this feeling of raptors from the Diamond Age. Oh, sorry, I started to get opaque there. I didn't know that was going to happen. In order to create the core experiences that people are going to have inside the metaverse. This is kind of a long way of saying that there's this moment we're in where we look at how fast the technology is moving, and we think about how much it's changing everything, and how, today it's the metaverse and tomorrow it's cryptocurrency and NFTs, and everyone wants to know how this is going to work, or what the coding is going to be, or what tools that everyone needs to invest in. But the truth is that all these tech questions hide something pretty fundamental, which is that the tech people need you. They need the performing arts to help them navigate human interaction. Theater has been doing good user experience, good human interaction for millennia. It's what we do. Some of the most effective immersive theater work I've seen can often look like a first-year movement workshop for actors. Even as all of this starts to mount up into something that feels way bigger than any one of us, the truth is point to point, the basic interactions, the basic rules that performing arts have developed are the very thing that's going to drive all of these spatialized computing experiences, from our approaches to lighting and sound and interaction. And if anything, we have the privileged position of knowing what works, being those tastemakers, and being able to demand that the tech people make better tools for us. because if more of our work can come through, then they're going to get exactly what they want, which are compelling, irresistible experiences that'll keep people coming back over and over again. Thanks. That's the thing. For all I know, I've been talking into a wall. I can't realize there's no people. There's no people.
No, I had to stop myself from not disturbing your presentation, but I was smiling at your jokes, and there was a reaction, I believe, in the audience, but it's hard to not see it.
It's the weirdest format alive.
I'm sure the technology will quickly evolve to allow some better feedback from the audience. But thank you very much for really an enthusiastic and encompassing presentation. And I'm gonna start the questions and answers with something that you just said right now at the end, that tech developers, tech giants need you, theater performers, performing artists, and I'm not sure I see clearly that evidence, because I don't see them investing that much into theater, into the performing arts. And to continue a bit, I see the giants, the tech giants in television, the Netflix, the Disney, who put really big money behind making films for their platforms. Do you think a similar thing may happen with immersive theater, but supported by immersive tech developers?
So you mentioned Disney, right? And Disney is investing in this idea of immersive pretty heavily. We're still in the R&D phase of so much of this, but Disney's in the theme park business, right? Yeah. So on the themed entertainment side, and so many of these companies, particularly as they diversify, they're leaning towards immersive tech, but they're also leaning towards immersive performance. So Star Wars Land, which is in Florida and in California, Disney did cut the entertainment budget from it, and to great consternation, both by fans and by pretty much everyone watching that project. But they've been concentrating what they've been doing with the performance in the hotel that they're building in Florida. And in that hotel, this resort experience, which is like a 3-day long, all expenses paid, routine, they're going to be hiring immersive theater folks. And this is going to be a crucible for them. If they can make money on it, if they can demonstrate that this is a higher value ticket that they can sell and add on, then they'll start to pull this stuff into the parks. Universal in Japan right now, they just opened Super Mario Land, and they have the whole AR interactive side of things. But again, they're turning to immersive designers. It's not going to look like these big companies are going to come in and suddenly become patrons of the arts. It's going to look a lot more like the R&D production that we just saw with Dream. It will not be folks coming into our stages and letting us do what we've always done. It's going to be us going into those spaces, designers being hired. Filmmakers alone, they can't crack the nut. They try to bring filmmakers in to do this stuff, and it doesn't work because filmmakers, they work inside the frame, right? And it's lovely. And I love film. I'm a giant film nerd. I love comic books. I love frames. But performing artists are the ones who understand the third dimension, who understand how you tell story by putting bodies into relationship with each other. And without that,
no. Okay,
the VR stuff doesn't work.
I have a couple of follow-ups to that, but I'd rather move to another topic, so we cover a wider range, and then we come back to threads if we can. A question about the quality of theater. Do you think that the quality of theater as it is now in physical spaces can be transferred to a just digital format, so no connection to the physical? And the question continues, what would it be for you? What could replace the feeling of being together in the same space?
I never think in terms of replacement. So, even with this idea, say, of taking Sleep No More and shoving it into the Oculus, right? That doesn't replace the experience of going to sleep no more. What it does is it allows me to take home a version of it, a little piece of it. It can work as an extension. It can work as what in video games we call a side quest. So imagine, if you will, this idea that a piece of virtual reality content was created using the assets of the McKittrick Hotel. Maybe the space was volumetrically captured. Maybe the artists were volumetrically captured and then skinned onto motion captured frameworks. And then a story was made that looked like the actors and looked like the McKittrick, but was separate from the story of Sleep No More. So that becomes something that Punch Drunk and Immersive can then go and sell to people with headsets. That doesn't replace the experience of Sleep No More. But people who would never be able to get to Sleep No More could experience it. They might find themselves inspired to go where they weren't inspired before. And it becomes another revenue stream. This is exactly what Disney's doing with Star Wars Land, right? The movies and the comic books and the TV shows, they hopefully get people so in love with this stuff that they can't help but go to Florida or California. That also gets into this idea of, interconnected and sort of transmedia approaches to things. And all of the stuff that makes that stuff stick, the stuff that the qualitative part of it, it's only good if it has that magic that theater has. If you want to talk about just, taking up a piece of theater and plopping it down into VR, you can do that. It gets depending on which platform you're using, you might find yourself with something that feels kind of okay and maybe a little dynamic. You can definitely get a better spatial sense, right? You can see the bodies moving towards each other, in relation to each other. And things are getting better. It's still pretty early days, so, there's still some clunkiness to it. But I've seen some productions, I've seen some work, usually on the festival circuit.
I think the point was made. Yes, just I'm trying to make room for a few more questions. But yes, the point was very clearly made, and indeed, why talk about eliminating genres when they're successful? Just think about creating new forms and making them successful. So absolutely agree with that. There's another question that says, okay, tech companies need the performing arts to build the metaverse, but once a great deal of knowledge is transformed, will then theatre survive in the metaverse if they have transformed or transmitted and transferred all their knowledge?
Yeah, radio's not gone. The opera didn't go away. People still go to ballet. Movies didn't kill theater. It definitely, changed some of the dynamic. But it's the same way that television didn't kill the movies, right? It's all additive. It gets back to that core idea. You have to make something that leans in to the advantages of a live experience, right? You have to provide the thing. You can't just set up, a four-waller and do a show that way anymore, right? Sometimes it's fun to go sit and watch some Ibsen, but think of how dynamic live theater can be, how you can, even if you're not even trying to do like a full immersive theater bit, like how much you can just surround the audience and get that thing where you're in sync. You got to lean into it. I think in some ways it makes our craft better. We got to work harder.
You kind of gave me a cue now for the next question, which is, well, you were missing our reaction while you were talking to us. How do you think do you have any desires, thoughts on how emotional reaction can be part of an immersive theater in the future? And then this member of the audience continues that we can assure you that we laughed and were really entertained. So a great keynote.
Okay.
So coming back to the question is how might emotional reaction be transmitted to the performance?
So it's already happening, right? So you know, my friend Dasha, a bunch of my friends who are in the Underpresents. So the way the Underpresents works is the actors are puppeting their characters, right? And they're just performing in an Oculus. That's it. This is all they've got, right? So they don't have a full mocap rig. They're using the same device that the players are. The players, they're embodying characters, and I think I can bring up the slide here. If you see this, you know, you can see the characters that they're, so there's Prospero in the middle, right? And so that's one of the actors performing. And then these two kind of black, you know, angular shapes, those are the players wearing hats. There's not a lot of definition in those character bodies for the players, and they're muted. They can't talk. But nevertheless, there's still enough expression coming through the bodies of the players that the actors are able to figure out what the emotional state is. That's what I'm talking about when I say that, like, there's this, the fundamental thing that we do, which is bodies in space, right? If you're going to make good VR, you need a choreographer, you need a movement director, and you need actors who know how to pick up on these kind of unsubtle cues. But also the players will kind of lean in and start, you know, they know to express themselves. They're going to have to broaden themselves up a little bit, right? Those feedback dynamics are happening. It's just like this flat screen where, you know, we can't actually see even if I was looking at everyone's faces, I could never process all that information. Yes. This idea of, like, how close is someone, right? Are they leaning in? Or are they going back? It's already there. It's already happening. It's really exciting.
Okay, thank you. A question kind of not necessarily aligned with what we talked so far about the pandemic, and the pandemic having really made it clear to the public that the digital media is a place where we will continue to interact quite a lot in the future. The question says, do you think there's been a systemic change, or after the pandemic people will go back, particularly theater, back to their old habits and not necessarily adopt innovation? So it's a speculation about the future.
So one of the things that's exciting about the moment we're in is all the audiences that have been opened up that wouldn't come down to a theater, or that maybe are thousands of miles away. Sarah's going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit, I imagine. But we see people who, like, just couldn't access. There are people who have mobility issues or other things that prevent them from going to the theater. And I think that theaters would be wise to continue to look at this as a tool to reach those audiences, the audiences that lay beyond their traditional boundaries, right? Whether those are geographic or, you know, accessibility. I don't think that, you know, we have this other pressure, right? You know, I don't know if you've all seen, but, you know, they have literally had to send out, like, riot squads in Miami Beach to stop spring breakers from congregating, right? Like, people want to gather. They are desperate to gather. If anything, I think that, you know, something the pandemic has done is we're making do with a lot of this digital stuff, but humans want to human with each other in spaces as soon as possible. They are practically tearing down the walls, and it's actually been a real problem. But we do have this split, you know, like, there's plenty of people who haven't stopped trying to gather, and there's plenty of people who will be kind of concerned. But we have opened up this new pathway that, again, I think will be additive. At least in the initial phase, will definitely be additive. And in the long run, is there some threat as the AIs get sophisticated enough to like write, direct, and perform like all these things, that kind of knowledge transfer, will it happen? Yeah, but like when that happens, maybe the machines just pulp us all anyway, because they won't need us at that point. As soon as computers are selling NFT art that they've made to each other, we're all doomed anyway. So, meh.
There's quite a few more questions here, but I'm going to pick one which is somewhat controversial, and of course will invite a speculative answer. Yes, indeed, theater knowledge is very useful for a lot of tech developers. The big question is, who earns the money in the end, big companies or the artist?
Yeah, and that's always the case, right? So this is why I get down to the idea of demand better tools, demand better contracts, know your value. The most difficult thing we have, the hard thing is this, right? Is like there's always someone who's willing to underbid you, right? There
Yes.
always is. And there's also, you know, there's always just the matter of trying to chase the dollar over everything. A lot of my work focuses on the idea of building out the commons, right? Because by building out the commons, we can kind of acknowledge that, you know, cultural production has a value inherent of itself, right? The thing that frightens me the most these days when it comes to tech is that tech loves to disassociate, and this is the influence of the financial sector, right? Disassociating the work, the actual work, and the value. The huge craze, at least in the States, over this idea of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, people are selling JPEGs to each other for millions and millions and millions of dollars. And they're not even actually selling the art. They're selling a line somewhere that says someone owns the art, but it's so divorced from the actual thing, because our entire economy is divorced. Our global economy is divorced from actual goods. So kind of my challenge back is, what can we do to make sure that the artistic commons, that the tools and the access is getting easier, so that it's easier for everyone to create culture, and that for really, you know, brilliant artists to not have to move heaven and earth to express themselves. That's kind of my foldback there. And can we make that the terms for the companies?
No, thank you very much. It's been an inspiring talk and pertinent answers, and you've stirred quite a lot of interest and questions from the audience. Applauses from Dirk as well. Thank you very much. We'll have the opportunity to speak with you separately a bit later. Until then, we'll move on with our event to Annastina Haapasaari. I think I'm going to ask Annastina if I pronounce her name correctly. I might not have the right accent there. She's leading the Finnish National Opera and Ballet's Opera Beyond project that explores the possibilities of emerging technology for performing arts. Within this project, she's been working on audience experience and several installation pieces, but also developing the workflows and the overall digital strategy of the organization. Having a background in cinema and in communication, Annastina has worked with the new immersive mediums for several years and holds a major interest also in the larger societal impact of technology and digitization. Annastina, we're very happy and lucky to have you here, and we'd love to hear more from you. You have the stage.
Thank you for having me. I'll go and share my screen straight away with you. It should be there now. So hi everyone. Thank you for my introduction also. That was quite correct. In this presentation, I will first introduce you to our Opera Beyond project and share with you our vision for this exploration, and then go into presenting two different case studies of our digital immersive projects that sort of represent complementary sides in which new technology can cater to the performing arts. First will be our newly premiered immersive experience, Laila, and then secondly, our XR stage design tool, which is currently on a prototype phase. And I will go through some of the concrete learnings that we've had from this project so far. And then to end the presentation, I will also share some thoughts and also present some open questions that I have regarding the state of the art and our industry today. The Finnish National Opera and Ballet is located in Helsinki in Finland. It's quite a large opera and ballet company. We do a varied program from 18th century classics to contemporary pieces. There are around 25 different main stage performances in a year, or productions in a year, and 180 performances annually. And we have around 550 employees representing over 30 different nationalities. Well, that's of course normally. We're also now in a lockdown state, but this is the numbers are as in most of the years. We as an opera house see that we have an important role in maintaining and conserving the valuable tradition of opera and ballet, which of course have a long history behind them. But it is equally important to be open-minded and to be in dialogue with the changing world and to join in the development, really. And to pass on the legacy and keep these art forms alive and relevant, it's important that that every generation adds their footprint on these art forms and explores with them. And that is precisely why we have launched our Opera Beyond project a few years back. It's a multi-year project that really explores the possibilities that new technology can offer for the performing arts, both in terms of new kinds of performances and tools to cater the audience with even richer experiences and art experiences, but then also enhancing our workflows and also giving our contribution also to the wider ecosystem and making these bridges between the tech industry and the creative communities. Digital means various different things for different organizations, and here I would like to present a model of how we see the different sides of digital in our organization. By digital stage, we mean the audiovisual content that the audiences can consume and enjoy from anywhere. So in a sense, this is our Netflix. We stream through our own Stage 24 platform, but we also do collaboration with other like national broadcasting companies and also international platforms such as Oprah Vision. This category, of course, has been around for decades already. Well, we can maybe conclude that during the pandemic, in the performing arts sector, this category has really cemented this content as the standard. And of course, this category also evolves as the devices and mediums change and develop. When the radio changes to TV and the TV to mobile devices, but qualitatively, the main feature of this category remains the same, as this content can be enjoyed from anywhere if you have the devices. Maybe there are also the future developments in this category could involve a state when everyone has their own VR headset at home, or maybe the metaverse that we just heard about. Then we've labeled the communications and marketing tools as the PR stage. And this is also, of course, a standard, and it includes all the different digital tools that we can reach the customers with, keeping in touch with them between performances, outside of them. It includes mobile applications, the ticketing systems, the website, of course, most importantly today, the versatile and up-to-date social media reach and presence on each platform, on be it Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or any of the newer ones. The two remaining categories are our special focus in Oprah Beyond, and I will share with you a concrete example of each in a second. With on stage, we're talking about ways in which actual shows can be augmented with new technology. So in contrast to the digital stage, these novel performances or installations still require physical presence at a certain location, even though they still use technologies in novel ways. So on one hand, we can enrich our live shows that happen on the stage, those with new digital elements, or we can produce completely novel types of pieces or installations that rely on the technology even stronger. And our Laila project will be an example of this in a minute. And then something that is not as visible for the audience is the behind the stage. That there are our own workflows and our working tools, and technology can, of course, greatly enhance the efficiency of our workflows. And maybe from this pandemic also, we see the habit that we've taken of using the digital platforms, but we think, and I see that we've only seen a little glimpse of what is actually possible and of the different platforms that we can use, for example, for design processes. And I will go into that also. Yes. Then for the first case study, this our first milestone in this journey with Oprah Beyond. It's an installation called Laila. It's by composer Esa-Pekka Salonen, dramaturge Paula Vesala, sound designer Tuomas Norvio, and a concept designer team, Echo Collective. Laila rejects really the traditional roles of performing arts, as its music and its visuality evolve and change in interaction with the audience. And so Laila is this kind of a combination of physical and digital elements. As in concrete terms, it's a dome-shaped structure inside which the people are surrounded by a multi-sensory universe created with projection mapping, with a spatial sound system, with motion tracking technology and algorithms that then put all of this together and enhance the interaction between the piece and the audience. Even though it is an installation, it follows a narrative. It has a 3-act narrative structure, which in itself is an operatic element. Also, the visuals and the musical language and the dramaturgy are inspired by Oprah. They are abstract and yet recognizable and very emotional, high impact. The visuals are also rather abstract, but also dramatic, but they also leave freedom for the audience to make their own interpretations and feel it in their own way. There are no performers also in this installation, but the installation itself, Laila, has her own personality as she speaks for the audience, and she has different moods throughout the installation and the narrative, and we like to call her a new kind of an opera diva. It's maybe notable here that immersive arts, and immersive often means that sort of blending of not only different technologies coming together, but also blending of genres. And you can't always tell where the line goes between like performing arts and visual arts. And often it's a combination of those. And I think that's something we shouldn't be afraid of, because that's maybe creating really the interesting art of tomorrow. Now I would like to share with you a clip behind the scenes. If I could please have this. Yes, it's there.
I think the very initial conversation I had with Lili Paasikivi, who is the artistic director of the Finnish National Opera and Ballet, was several years ago, and I said I would like to do something within the organization that uses new technology and basically plays with the elements of an opera house, but without quite being an opera, and so on.
Well, Laila is an immersive artwork. It's an environment, it's a space. It's also kind of an AI entity, if you want to think about it that way. It's the product of our 1 year of hustling.
If you should actually rebuild opera, you can't rip it down more than we've done it. So it's missing all of the traditions of opera. It's missing a person on stage. There's no conductor. You don't sit. You're not a member of the audience who has a comfortable bench. You're actually going in to the experience, and then it's evolving with you. So it's hierarchy free in a way.
I guess what is really special about it for us is this highly multidisciplinary collaboration that we have here. So we are a multidisciplinary team. We have designers and technologists among ourselves, but then we also have a composer, a dramaturg, all of the professionals from the opera that help us create this piece.
I'm sure it has been a learning process for all, inside our collective, but also with the collaboration with others, for everyone.
To compose Laila was a very different process compared to everything else I've ever done before. I like to learn new things, and this has been a real learning curve, because none of it is composing in the traditional sense of the word.
So a big part of the sound design and the sound in the dome is a spatial sound, meaning that we have a 38.2 Genelec system in the dome. It's all around you. 3D spatial sounds means that there's no direction. Anything can happen anywhere.
We're working with really interesting technologies, so we get to do a really interesting projection mapping solution inside Laila, and we're also using AI in a kind of new type of way that helps the people who come to Laila interact with the artwork.
Every art form needs the traditional side, the legacy. We have to take care of the legacy, but we also have to make sure that there are new things that nobody has done ever before. And we also have to take the risk of some things not actually working out. So every new work is a risk in this sense. But if we don't take the risk, we are going to die, and the art form is going to die. It's going to dry out and lose its relevance. So the risk is well worth taking.
Thank you. I'll switch back, not here, but here. Let's go quickly through some of the technical specs and about the technology used in the installation. After comparison and research, we decided to go with custom-made dome. Even though there are, of course, a lot of these different ready-built solutions available in the market. One of the reasons we went with this solution was also the audio setup that was very ambitious and therefore required very tough hardware around. And so we went with our own solution. The whole installation runs on a game engine, and the visuals and the audio are controlled and operated separately from two different computers. The visual setup is created with projections, projectors. We have 8 of them, and we have placed them on the roof, at the center of the roof, and they have different the lenses so that they cover the whole inner surface of the dome, and then the floor is this kind of mirrored surface, so we didn't need to project that because we have a reflective surface there. As an opera house, we of course also wanted to pay close attention to the audio and also take the opportunity to sort of play with the audio setup once we had the opportunity. So the spatial sound system consists of 40 Genelec speakers that are placed all around the dome. And also each visitor has their own wearable speaker. And the visitors also record their own voice before stepping into the installation, and they will hear their own voice as part of the installation. Our composer Esa-Pekka Salonen and the sound designer Tuomas Norvio worked really closely together throughout the process, as the composition process and the whole audio design was very different from a traditional process in which you create a linear piece. In this one, you had both, also for the visuals, you had a base layer. So that was sort of the traditional composition, and the music. And then on top of that, we had a lead layer also for the visuals that had then the interactive elements in those. Learnings from this project. The creation process was by no means easy. It demanded a lot of patience, as we were using a lot of custom-made solutions and manually built technology. Our own workflows were really put into an acid test, really, and also because this was, as a traditional organization and doing traditional performances, this was our first immersive experience. Something that we learned during the process was that working with new technology always requires a lot of flexibility and patience, and we need to accept that things happen through a process of trial and error, and that there will still be some surprises, even though you think that you've considered everything. But all the more, it was very, very rewarding, as the experience was so cross-disciplinary. And I think this applies to most cross-disciplinary and multidisciplinary projects. Maybe the most important aspect was the continuous dialogue between all the departments involved in the process and all the team members. Here we worked in parallel with the different aspects of the piece. So the design of the visuals, the audio, the interactive elements, the visitor flow, communications. And it was so important that everyone was on the same page all the time, both artistically and also on the more technical viewpoint. So no one would do the same job twice. Some other concrete learnings, well, designing the audience experience and the flow of the visitors was as important as really making the piece itself. And the audience consists of real people, we learned, that are of different age and come from different backgrounds, have really different digital skills. So you need to find balance of guiding the audience enough while still giving them the freedom to experience the piece in their own way, because that's also really important if you are talking about art. Obviously the best practice to tackle this challenge is to do a lot of test runs and to involve test groups from different backgrounds as much as possible. And each round, I promise you'll find new aspects and new details that you haven't thought about before. Some concrete examples of this could be something that we quite quickly faced was the fact that many people want to take their selfies inside this kind of an installation, and there came up the question of if we should allow that or not, and we actually decided to allow that. Another one was that after some feedback, we realized that we should put into instructions maybe not to use skirts when going into the experience, as the floor is mirrored, and so to ensure that no one would see under each other's skirts. Here are some results or numbers from the project. We had 338 shows, and that meant around 2,000 audience members. That's also something to take into consideration, is that this kind of a performance doesn't take, if one main stage performance one night takes 1,500 people inside the show during one evening. This is so much smaller capacity that you have to run it really 100 times to or more to have the same amount of audience members experience it, and that's a limitation, but also well, something to take into consideration. Of course, it's qualitatively a different thing. We had more showcase tours coming up, but then those were obviously cancelled due to the COVID situation. But we are hoping to tour the piece more and have more audiences experience it. Then for the second case study, now
Annastina,
yes.
I'm sorry to interject, but I think we're already beyond the allocated time. So
Okay.
maybe we could just leave this for later, and maybe we could move to kind of some quick conclusions.
Sure.
I'm sorry to cut you here.
Yeah, I'll mention just really quickly, because I think this is interesting, and I would like to know if someone else here is maybe doing something similar. This is basically our project to explore how the whole stage design process could be tomorrow when using VR and 3D modeling, and putting all the stage design process into one platform where we could do it virtually and digitally from scratch to finish, basically. Yes, but I will maybe tell more about that if someone's interested in the Q&A. Some conclusions and observations we've done throughout this journey so far. We had this project before COVID, and yet it has been strengthened by this time, as the immersive leap and the digital leap is finally really happening throughout the performing arts industry and in people's minds as well. It means, as I mentioned, blending of art forms and genres, and also involving very multidisciplinary teams in each of these projects. And I think that's really a richness that comes with the immersive art and in these pieces. That's really nice to meet new people, and they give you new ideas, and you can learn so much from them. Then also, obviously, as we're all here, we understand probably all the importance of co-learning and sharing best practices and inspiration, because that's really something that we're now doing really new, novel things. So it's good if we keep on experimenting together, and then maybe not all do the same mistakes. It's obvious that we need to stay in constant dialogue with the changing world, and really keep in mind that we need to expose ourselves for change and be open for new opportunities as they come. Thank you very much. Sorry, I ran over time.
No, it's been, I'm sorry to have to cut through, to cut short a very, very interesting and comprehensive presentation. We've learned a lot, and there's been quite a lot to take in there. And yes, if you talk about scale, 338 shows is quite a lot, and the dome you have is really impressive. So anyway, we took a lot on board. It's been inspiring. Many questions come to mind. Questions are already in the stream. Please post your questions, but we'll delay the answers until we have the last presentation of tonight, and that is of Sarah. So Annastina, thank you very much. We'll bring you back on the stage in the final questions and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we'll move on to the last presentation of tonight, of this session, given by Sarah Ellis, of the Director of Digital Development for the Royal Shakespeare Company. Sarah is an award-winning producer, and she's been a pioneer in exploring new artistic initiatives and partnerships that are rooted and founded in digital technology. I think I can say that she's one of the most prominent figures who drives innovation in artistic practice rooted in technology in the United Kingdom, and I believe in the world. For example, in 2013, she was actually listed in the top 100 most influential people working in gaming and technology. So I think she's really a leading thinker and also practitioner. She's has won numerous awards and accolades, and I can only mention the Hospital Club and Creative Industries Award for cross-industry collaboration in 2016 for her work with the Royal Shakespeare Company's production The Tempest in collaboration with Intel and the Imaginarium Studios. Again, a very revolutionary piece for the time, and I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have already heard of Dream. And Sarah tonight will talk about how the Royal Shakespeare Company has reframed their experiences to respond to COVID. She will take Dream as their recent production Dream as a case study, but her talk will be more encompassing. Sarah, we're very happy and honored to have you on board, and the floor is yours now.
Thank you so much for your very lovely introduction. That's really, really kind, and it's really, really great to be here with you this evening. I think it's fair to say. I'm Sarah. I work at the Royal Shakespeare Company and have done for the past 10 years. And I suppose in this moment, I think we've never in theatre had such a profound shift and what we've experienced over the past year with the pandemic. So I wanted to obviously talk about our work, but also talk about hope and talk about what we've found at this time, and for us to look at the accelerated disruption that we've experienced and how virtual reality, XR, all of those new technologies that have always been coming into the performing arts and actually innovated by the performing arts, how we make this moment meaningful and how we bring together some things that may have been distant. Because in my job, really, digital has always had a label and it's often been other, but actually in this pandemic, for us to be able to connect as theatres, we've had to use the tools and technologies that maybe some of us have been innovating for quite some time, and they had to go at the heart of our business and what we do. So in that sense, what have we found is really important to understand and hold on to. And Dream was a performance that we've just just finished last week. So, but it was a culmination of a huge amount of research and development that had actually been happening for a program called Audience of the Future through a good few years. And there was huge amounts of R&D that were happening, but we were due to do a performance in Stratford-upon-Avon in person last June, and the pandemic stopped that, and we had to completely rethink how we would get this experience to audiences and what we had. It was a collaboration with the Philharmonia Orchestra, Marshmallow Laser Feast, Manchester International Festival, and ourselves at the Royal Shakespeare Company. And the first thing we did was do some audience research and consultation about what audiences wanted and where they were at. And in that audience research, probably around the summer of 2020, audiences came back to us and said they were craving togetherness and liveness, but they also highlighted a huge digital inequity in what the technology was in people's homes and hands. And that's really important to acknowledge when we're looking at audiences going forward. We have audiences that have historically come to our buildings where we can provide the experience to them and what they're going to get. But we cannot assume that people have equity in the technology that's available to them. We also, when we are iterating with new technologies, need to understand our privilege. And I think that's one of the things about the pandemic, it's exposed privilege and it's exposed areas of inequity. And we have to think about that as practitioners, particularly if we're building audiences and particularly if we're genuinely asking the question about ourselves, about accessibility and inclusion, and the fact that we want people to experience this work. Are we putting it in a way, are we sharing it in a way that people can access? So a lot of that work has fed into what Dream was, which was a performance online in real time of actors in motion capture suits performing characters in the world of the play inspired by Midsummer Night's Dream. It brought together a range of artists, a range of practitioners, and companies all working in completely different ways. And if we label what the spirit of innovation is about and the spirit of R&D is about, it's about making something new and taking a risk and going into the unknown in a piece of work. I think Esa-Pekka put it brilliantly on his video. We have the legacy of the work that's come before us, but we really need to think about the unknowns and the things that haven't happened yet when we genuinely look at innovation. And to build innovation and to deliver innovation, our audiences need to understand when we put something out there as R&D, that we're putting it out there to be curious and to welcome the conversation. And what Dream did last week was it hit an audience around virtual reality and XR that wasn't about the device in which you were experiencing it, but it gave them a connection to what they could experience using the technologies that they have in their homes, whether that's mobile, tablet or desktop. And also go, and what if you experience that on VR? What if you experience that in person? What would that be like? And that's what's important about these moments of accelerated disruption, is that we think about who we want to bring with us and how we do that. So we increase the possibilities for this work to be seen, understood, and for us to get excited by. And it requires a lot of openness and trust by the practitioners to achieve that. And I think to also look at a global audience, we also need to look at the traditional systems of which we've made our work. This is a digital picture of the Royal Shakespeare Theatre that holds just over 1,000 people. And every night about 1,000 people can or will be able to, when we open our buildings again, come together and experience a play together. When we're looking at global audiences joining us remotely, it's really important to think about the rituals and how they come into that digital space with us. And some of the things that we did, the build that we did around Dream, was not just about the work and creating the play, but we also looked at the website that you came into, and some of the most shared images from Dream last week were people seeing a counter go up on their bottom right-hand screen of how many people were watching this play together. And I found that so fascinating, because what it was saying was people were showing up for a performance. We are showing up together. Some were getting dressed up, some were excited. The anticipation of a real-time experience all together, wherever you were in the world, people wanted to connect, and that togetherness and liveness is what takes us forward. And it shows what happens when we can collaborate, when we don't just look at theatre, but we look at music, we look at digital-led work, we look at festivals, that actually what we can do is share our audiences, because people didn't come to this performance just because of the RSC. They came to it through their different avenues, their different age ranges, their different cultures, and they found this performance. And in 1 week, we've reached approximately 65,000 people have seen and experienced that with us. And my question is, in the time of huge, profound change and difficulty, what have we found and what have we learned? We've learned that our audiences want to show up, our audiences are still with us, and the work that we make can be risky and innovative and hopeful. And as we open our buildings alongside that, we have to work in concert to welcome those audiences with us and back with us as we open up, but also perhaps as makers be more open to the possibilities of what we can achieve, not just as an in-person audience, but as a world of audiences and wherever they are. Because the potential for actually smaller scale venues is super interesting. If you're a 400-seater theatre in a region, you are not restricted by those 400 seats. You could be a 10,000-seater experience going forward. And it's about looking at those hierarchies of experience, and also how do we create a meaningful connection with an audience that's really far away? How do we look beyond our walls? How do we take that forward? And what skills and opportunities do we need in order to make those experiences with our audiences? And that comes down to repair and connection, and works like Dream being a piece of R&D that takes risk, but not only with the performance, but with the form. And what new forms are we building? When we look at the process of making Dream, one of the big challenges was, we had the big question, are we making a piece of theatre? Are we making a film? Or are we making a game? And my answer was probably a bit of both. We're making something new. And I think in the XR community, I think that's really live and resonant. But sometimes we're focused on putting a label on it before we found out what it is. And I think Noah talked about that brilliantly when we talk about technology companies really interested in this space and looking at theatre to help explore that new space with them, but also acknowledge that it's not that technology companies or these things will come into our stages as they are, but it might be really exploratory for us as practitioners to go alongside this journey with technology companies or location-based experiences and bring that back into theatre. And that's super interesting. So how can we decrease the disparity between arts practitioners and technologists, and make sure that the technology is now starting to embed as a tool that we often use rather than a technology that's elsewhere? And how do we create the emotional connections with digital co-presence and digital avatars? And I had the real fortunate luxury privilege to sit in the mocap volume on the final performance of Dream that was being streamed out to about 7,000 people. But the intimacy of the performance of the actors in mocap, and the physicality and the puppetry and the presence and the emotional connection they had with each other was phenomenal. And I think going forward, you can create both and understand that you can have an experience at home or you can have an experience in person, and they don't need to be exactly the same. It's about distributed content. It's about finding the content that works for where you're at, whether you're in the room or whether you're outside and in your room. How do we make that experience the best it can possibly be? So when we look at the challenges around that, and we're looking at large scale work, we need to understand that still to achieve that, it needs a huge amount of infrastructural support around streaming. It needs a huge amount of support in terms of making of that. And we've also got to think about the commercial return and the ways we can commercialize this work, so that when we look at XR, that we make it an industry that we can build a knowledge, and we can build systems, and we can build a way of making it and take the skills and expertise forward. I think that when you look at Dream as a piece of work, and you look at where that came from, the ashes of a pandemic, where when we stopped production in March, the day before the pandemic hit us, where we had to stop work, we had recorded the Philharmonia Orchestra's work conducted by Esa-Pekka Salonen, the Ravel piece that we used, and Jesper Norden's work. And that was the starting point for a huge pivot for us. The work we would have made in Stratford would have been an LBE with devices, and it would have had a certain moment and a certain absolute spirit of innovation and R&D using video projection mapping. But because we had this constraint, we were able to work with that constraint, and that constraint was we couldn't be in person. So it forced us to made us think about, when we look at the new skills, to look at virtual production tools, not just in the performance of it, but the making of it. How can we use the Unreal Engine? How did we use the engine to allow us to connect real-time live show control and also embed that in a web player streaming platform that was also hitting multi-platforms in real time globally? We reached 86 countries, and we're going to unpick that statistic to really understand more about how we reached them and how far we got. But also, the constraint allowed us to look at the technologies such as gesturement, which is a form of musical technology where in motion capture the actors were being the instruments and their movement was creating the real-time soundtrack of the performance. And actually having a movement director that was driving all of that, that actually the performance was incredibly physical in the space. And what you saw through a run of 8 to 10 shows in a week is every performance was different. And that's no different to the houses that we perform in our buildings, that each performance we're presenting in the same way, but it feels slightly different every day, because those rituals that we have and those aspects that we have around the day that we've had, whether it's raining outside, what audiences are feeling, will affect a performer's performance in real time. And we saw that we had a 2 AM performance in the middle of the run where the actors were performing in the middle of the night, and that was one of the best performances they did. And we connected a Japanese audience with a US audience, and they were in the middle of that, and there were audiences they'd never normally be able to create or connect with, because we've been programming and we work to in our buildings of a local time zone. But when we look at the possibilities around distributing online, we are a global program, and this work is equitable alongside any other theatre company or group that is making work. And how we share those audiences, how we build that together, is through collaboration. And I believe we can bring people in through the Shakespeare and they can walk out with the wonder of the technology. We can also find audiences through the wonder of the music, and they walk away with the storytelling. And that's the interesting thing right now in XR, is we haven't landed, we're still moving forward. The impact of the pandemic is very much about what we've found, but also let's find the audience and work with them now to make this work more broad, more inclusive, more accessible, more exciting, more engaging, increase the diversity of who makes this work, whose stories are told, how we share it, and also unlock the possibilities of what happens when you have constraint and how you turn that into something positive and find something new through it. And I firmly believe that those are the fundamental principles around risk and innovation that we need to look at and take forward as we move forward into our buildings through this pandemic. How we take all of that back with us and hold on to that when we will be craving connection, when we'll be craving togetherness and physical togetherness. One thing we noted as a final note, when we were making this work, the hardest thing was to be far away from each other. And actually, but when we were together in really safe environments and we had very strict protocols around our health and safety, one of the things we learned is we needed to relearn how to do our jobs again. And it took us a beat. We all recognized the first moment we walked in the room with each other and how we had to relearn some of our togetherness and liveness in making the work, and how much connection really helps make a piece of theatre, and how it absolutely crucial when you're connecting with audiences, how you need to re-navigate that as we come out of this. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you very much. As always, a really inspiring talk, and what I want to maybe take out of your talk is the fantastic ability that this project has demonstrated in adapting theatrical performances, which were assumed in your case in situ, to a pandemic which actually invalidated physical contact and audiences, and what a lovely piece of work emerged out of that, and what great reaction. And I'm not sure how hard it was to talk to work to those constraints, but the output was really impressive and amazing. So it's been great.
It was around, in all honesty, it was one of the most profoundly difficult things I've ever done, and with the people that made it, they took such courage to make it, and we had a couple of moments where we weren't sure whether we would, and it was done in such a short amount of time, but yeah, there were a couple of moments where we were like, should we stop or whatever, and there was such a compelling desire from people that they needed to make work at this time. And I'm really pleased to say that we employed over 200 freelancers in this time, and that gave work. We gave work to people at a really difficult time, yes. And that's so important. And I also hope we validated and supported the future funding of this work and the conversation about this work. That was really important.
Well, thank you very much. And in a way, I kind of open up the question and answer sessions, but in the spirit of politeness, I think I should invite Annastina to join us, and Dirk, I think, I'm not sure you wish to be, and Paula. I think we're all part of the family of speakers in the last panel. There are quite a few questions already coming through. Please, audiences, members of the audience, do send your questions through the channels that you know. I would like to take the privilege of being host and maybe ask both Annastina and Sarah the question of resourcing such experiences at scale, because we have quite a few smaller theatre companies who are very pioneering, great ideas, but they don't have the resources that you have. So how do you think, how much does it cost you to put such experiences, and is there a brighter future in terms of costs to smaller theatre companies? So if you want to start, Sarah.
I can answer that question, which was Audience of the Future was a funded program. So we weren't, so at that time it was protected in that way, and it was across 14 partners, and it was running over quite a few years. And we always took the project on to share the learnings, and basically over from April till September, we'll do a lot of sharing of what we've done in order to make it a lot cheaper. And we'll be looking at the different, obviously with R&D, it's often a lot more expensive because you haven't tested the model before, if you know what I mean. So you're putting a lot more resource in to make it work, but we'll do a couple of scenarios about different costings of how to make this work in the future at different budgets in order to promote that, if you know what I mean. And we'll also be sharing a huge amount of the audience research and analysis, again, to support companies that maybe are less privileged. And I absolutely recognise the privileged environment that we were in on this, that it's really important we share all that in order to help make that work.
I can't wait for a public announcement from you about I don't know if that's ever going to be made, but about how many tickets that were costed £10 were sold, because you had two streams. You had a free one and one costed with tickets. So if you can ever share that, it'll be a good insight on how audiences have the appetite. So, Annastina, you have presented an impressive installation with tons of speakers and vibration floors and all that. How were you able to afford that? And are there kind of less expensive infrastructures that you think may be used by other colleagues who are less endowed?
Well, for Laila, the major part of the cost really came from the hardware. There was so much gear in the installation that was the main cost in the installation. We also have a private fund from Jane and Otto's Erkko Foundation, a private foundation. So that was the base of our production budget. And then on top of that, we also we had Genelec, which is a Finnish loudspeaker manufacturer, one of the top in the world in their field. We had a sponsorship with them, and I think that's maybe one thing that I could maybe share, and where I see a possibility for even more collaboration is that if we make projects and we that can also create sort of additional value for these tech companies to test their gear in new surprising ways, or yes, like piloting them, then we can have them become interested in us, even though if they haven't been before so interested in the traditional arts. Here is actually a moment where we can make new bridges with the tech industry and make new collaborations with that sector. So maybe that's maybe one new opportunity window that I see in the immersive projects.
Okay, well, thank you. That kind of links to a similar point that we discussed with Noah earlier about tech giants and the relationship with smaller theatre companies. I want to ask Dirk, who is the host, on how we proceed, because I've already started questions and answers. Dirk, how do you want to frame this final session? Do we continue with a few more questions and then we leave 10 minutes?
Yeah, let's do it, because I think that what we just heard from our two speakers, that is summarizing very well all that what we talked within the 2 days on a large scale, of course, but that are the same questions. What kind of stories our audience want to hear? How we can use technology to support the art. And theater is in all of our talks in the center of our initiatives. And I also wanted to ask what we did yesterday at the end of each panel. What is the hope you see for your work for the future? And also I'm very interested in, for both projects, what do you think, which are your audience leaving your theater with a hope, with a vision for a future? And do you have an idea what kind of vision they might have?
Sarah, do you want to go first?
You go, you have the floor now, so why don't you?
Well, I think one of the key lessons is maybe that for a traditional art institution or organization, it's always to our benefit to have a variety of different kinds of mediums in our use and different kinds of performances. So now we're really opening up new doors and new opportunity windows and new ways of making performances, and I think we should keep that variety and the spectrum of different kinds of stages and enhance the digital stage really in the future. And I think it is, of course, well, that comes without saying that it's a meaningful time to, for example, offer the streaming, like our streaming operas have like really like the numbers, the viewers have skyrocketed, and it's really like new audiences are finding our shows, and also globally. And I think that's also very interesting and something that we haven't explored yet before as a national art institution. Our audiences have been very much located in Helsinki and in Finland, so it is exciting for us to open up the audience in that sense too.
Mm-hmm. And Sarah, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just I think so excited about our audiences and how the critical debates that the industry and audiences and makers want to have. I think we're hungry to make. I think, you know, we can't underestimate the constraint that's happened, and that has been an absolute you know, reminder of why we do what, you know, why we make and what our compellingness to make work is about. And I think that what we're entering into, which is super exciting, is what are these new terms and conditions? What are these new terms and conditions to make work? How do we deal with inequity? How do we deal with accessibility and inclusion? Genuinely so, from the organic origins of making this work. Can the XR community, provocation, change some of that and be a change maker for a lot of that? But also, when we have put work out there, whether you like the work or not, that is fine. The critical debate around it is super interesting, and it means that we're showing up, and it means that we have a lot to say, and there's a lot to do. And we do have a lot to do as we come through this. We have an awful lot to do. That's really exciting, and I hope that we'll keep an openness and a framework to be able to constructively talk about this work going forward. I really do hope that.
Yep. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to an interesting question here about live performances, but shared virtually. And you must have heard this question before, but I want to see your take tonight on it. The question says, I like to imagine the audiences getting dressed up before going to see the play, even if they stay at home. Is there any experience / idea how the audience itself could see each other as part of the evening? Everyone is only a spectator, you know, so how this liveness and that event, that you really, the special event, can you speculate based on what you've done so far, how that might be achieved?
That's the next step, right? We've been broadcasting out in these Zooms, and, you know, we can all have our backgrounds. I watched the Geffen Playhouse, and I loved watching the audience. I mean, I loved the show, but I loved watching the audience. I mean, you had some really properly engaged people. You were in their homes, you're seeing their backgrounds, some were dressed up. We need a bit more sort of what I would call cross interactivity, because at the moment we're just in and out and we're broadcasting out. And that's a big design experience, surely provocation challenge to people to do. The ritual around live performance, that's what it's about. That was honestly, you know, all these rituals that we have, that's, you know, whether we're sort of getting dressed up or lighting a candle or having a drink, and also it depends on what time of day. You know, you've got a US audience and then a UK audience, different times of day, all of that. But honestly, it gave me such delight when I was watching some of those Zoom theatre pieces. Honestly, seeing people's audience engagement was just such delight. I think there's way more to do in that area. Super exciting.
Okay, and Annastina?
Well, I think this point is maybe even like maybe more emphasized in the opera and the ballet world, because it's like really maybe half of the experience of going. It's the opera nights, and when you go to the opera, you really do dress up. You do enjoy your glass of champagne and your fancy pastries before the show. And yes, there is a lot to do in that sense. And I think there is the fatigue that we're getting now from being on Zoom all the time. That is something to really tackle. And that's why we need variety of the digital presence and virtual presence. And we need to find new ways to make it more multisensory, not just Zoom all the time.
But if I may, it may sound flippant, but I think it's important. There's a new custom now that's being developed, or new behavior, where you get sent a bottle of champagne and it comes at the right time, and someone knocks at the door and it offers it to you, and it's such a lovely thought. And I was the subject of that, and Dirk is smiling, but it really works and adds to. And it's a small gesture, but we may be able to develop new behaviors to make something out of the social event that we otherwise are missing.
And I think, sorry, Marian, that I jump in, but I think it's also saying a lot of the connections we built up in the past to our audience. And that they might be far stronger than we expected. Because theater is an important place for the social exchange. And audience is showing it in these little gauges to all of us, that they want to come together, that they want to have that they want someone to be
events. Yes. And
that's something what we really can take out of that crisis.
I don't want to exclude other members of the panel, but I also don't want to face them with questions that they may not wish. But Paula and Noah, please, Paula, any thoughts share with us on this or what we discussed so far?
Just let me add something that Dirk said, because also after listening to Noah's keynote, I think that me being one of the film people, being hungry for the knowledge of the theater people, and I exactly tried to do that yesterday and asked the theater people a bunch of questions, what I wanted to know, to share a little bit of their expertise. And I just get reminded of something that Laura Tonge in the social media panel, that was the second panel, said, that one of her social games, her Insta game, got hacked by the people because they became so passionate and so hungry of working together, of playing together, and had this hunger for co-presence, for being there. And she pointed out that even if it's just or only digital, it's still very, very real, and it matters in our lives. So I think that is something that we can take out from here, and that connects a little bit these 2 days from today, and also connects very nicely to what Sarah said.
And I think Noah is ready to interject. Please,
yeah,
Noah.
I wanted to play off what Dirk just said. You know, if you look at the platforms, if you look at the tech platforms, what are all these people? What are all these companies trying to do? They want to own the platforms that communities exist on. They're obsessed with the idea of building tools for communities. Theater is a communal act, right? You know, and to Dirk's point about, you know, the relationship you have to your audiences, the relationship you have to your community, the role you play there, that's the social value, right? That's in some ways the artistic value, and it can be the financial value, right? The financial part is what sustains that work. But if you're providing for your community, if you're giving those tools, then you're part of that dynamic. And I think the more you lean into that, that's a big part of the whole thing in live. So it's absolutely critical to be thinking about, you know, your community of performers, your community of technicians, your audience community, and how is it really a community and not just a group of people that you extract value from. Because that's the difference. Like all the platforms like community, and they just see this people as something they can farm. We know that a community is something you have to grow.
Yeah. I'd like to bring the audience back into our conversation, and I'm going to pick another question that we received on our channels. There's a general question. It's initially addressed to Sarah, but I think everybody can try to chip in with an answer. The technology to integrate the experience and deploy the experience to the public, to produce the experience, is not aligned with the actual timeframes that a theatre production might work to. The undertext is that you may need to invest more time, you need to have more development, you need to have larger teams to drive these experiences. What is the economics of the new digital space in terms of immersive theatre?
I think it's a yes and model. And I think it's, to be fair, I think it's some are longer. It's a variable answer depending on what you want to do. So it's not like an either or issue. And I would argue it's more about skill sets and expertise. And if we can where the inequity is at the moment is there's a big disparity in the way that a coder developer works to a theatre practitioner. So it's more about the cultural ways of working that are more the challenge right now. And the more we bring that more closely together and the more organic we are in that, I think the efficiencies will naturally evolve, because there's some brilliant things about theatre, but there's also some what I would call inefficiencies there too. And do you see what I mean? So it's really got to be a co-created collaborative next step. I found that a big challenge on Dream. We had so many different ways of working and different languages. I mean, it was like the Star Wars bar in frankness of how we made that work, which is why we got to share the learnings. I do think a lot of, in some ways, we talk about the work and making the work, we've really got to look at our infrastructures and our, do a bit of work on that behind the scenes. So quite right to raise it, quite right, it's a challenge.
Yes.
It's not an either or.
Yes, yes. Annastina?
Well, I would agree with Sarah that we need to really, sorry, we need to really learn to speak each other's language when we are working at the sort of borderline and crossroads between art and tech. And we did have in our Laila production, there were some cultural clashes and misunderstandings all the time. But I think through doing more of this productions, we will find a language that we both speak fluently, and I think it's also more interesting when we have people coming from all the different backgrounds, and I think that's where the inspiration really is born.
Any members of the panel would like to step in on this question? I have, oh God, Noah was faster than you, Dirk, so we'll give the floor to him, and then one fraction of a second.
the framing for these discussions is best when it's kind of put into an experience design frame. And there's a lot that can be borrowed from game design and from software when we start thinking of experience design. And what's exciting about the immersive arts is that it does borrow liberally from gaming, film, theater, architecture. All of it gets bent towards this idea of what is the experience? What is the story as it's viewed from the point of the participant, right? Human-centered design. The idea that every single person who enters into the space is the protagonist of their own story. And then you can start bringing in a lot of the storytelling tools we have in our world into these dynamics.
And now over to Dirk, who was a fraction of a second later.
No, I think that what we can learn, especially when we listen to Sarah and project like Dream, how many people they can reach.
Yes.
That theater in general maybe should be a little bit more braver and trust more that the audience will follow them when theater is merging the digital world and the traditional theater. And Noah said it today as well, that theater survived so many new developments. When radio came up, it was in danger. With cinema, it was in danger. With television. And at the end, it was never really in danger, because it's a strong and one of the oldest arts we have. But and I think that's what we, Paula, you step in, please. But that's something we really can take out of the 2 days, that there are so many possibilities to add positive effects from the digital technologies, and nothing is taking really the foundation of theater, and that are the stories.
Now there's a cue to you, Paula. So whether you want it or not, you must come in.
I'm still thinking, well, I thought it was a very nice final word, but yeah, I'm trying my very best here. I was just thinking that of something that Annastina said, that constraints helped us, or was it you, Sarah, or one of you two, that constraints release such a big amount of creativity in your works. And also some of my panelists of yesterday, for example, Steve Bull, he said something similar. They invented a game and they had to find out how to do a setting and still activate the people. And they did. At the end, they had construction workers dancing in the streets. I mean, such a power has performative arts, and there's power that can only be released through real emotions, I think. And I'm so grateful for this forum today and yesterday, because I took for myself, for my work, so much inspiration, and I hope you did too. And I just can thank you all for giving me hope. That's it.
Well, that sounds like we're moving towards concluding the session, and it's all on a high, on a lot of hope, as the name of the conference is. And if I could say my few words, and then of course I leave the last words to Dirk. It's a fantastic space of innovation, and there is so much buzz in the air. It's so much more than it was 10 years ago. It is amazing how much energy has been brought to this space. In a kind of strange way, COVID forced us to think even stronger about the opportunities that this media provide, and I'm more optimistic and more hopeful than ever to see so much energy behind it, so many projects, so many intersections, yet just a little bit of the space of the opportunities that is available out there. And I'm quite hopeful that we'll see some persuasive forms. We already see them, but in the very near future, maybe they will start to be commonplace. And I think I've said my bit. Dirk, how do you wish to conclude? I should have thanked, but I leave the thanks to you, maybe too.
Yeah, no, you did it marvelous. And first, thanks to the speaker of that panel.